Well, good afternoon. As many of you know, we've recently took action in terms of suspension of the sheriff here in Clay County, given that there were pending charges. We were able to get some good interim leadership in here, but we were watching the election results on a couple weeks ago because we knew that if Michelle Cook won, then we would be able to give her a head start and get her in there early. And so that's what we're doing today. I'll be appointing her, in fact, to be the sheriff of Clay County. We congratulate her on her election victory. I called her on election night and said, well, you know, because you have to do a write-in. Is there a write-in again?
There was. He withdrew.
Okay, so you're allowed. Okay, all right. Well, at the time, she thought she'd have to do, and then obviously you take office later. And I was like, I think you're going to get a head start here. And she's like, can I have a few days to just kind of, I was like, yep. So, but we're happy to do it. And I think that given the election results in other areas, as we get into January, she'll be the only woman sheriff out of 67 counties in the state of Florida. So we're proud of her for that. And we're proud of, the men and women in law enforcement. It's a difficult time for men and women in law enforcement in certain parts of the country. Obviously, really, I think anywhere they're feeling it. In the state of Florida, we don't have any tolerance for anti-law enforcement actions. Don't assault police. Don't do some of the things that we're seeing. We will hold you accountable because when people wear the uniform, they are giving themselves, putting their safety at risk to be able to help other people. And I can tell you that every one of those folks that are wearing the uniform, if they get called to go help a victim, they're not asking, what the race of the victim is or ethnicity or there. If someone's in need, they're going there, and it doesn't matter. And that's what they do every single day. And so we've got to stand with one voice on this, and it's not always fashionable in certain media circles because they have certain agendas. But I can tell you, if you don't support law enforcement, if you defund law enforcement or do some of the crazy things that we've heard over the last many months, the citizens of your jurisdiction will pay the price, and particularly the most vulnerable among us, who won't have the ability to have someone stand up for them. The folks who have resources and all that, they don't need to have a lot of law enforcement because they're in their own communities and everything's all done. It's really the folks who are the less fortunate in our society that really depend on the rule of law to be there for them. And that's what our men and women in law enforcement do every single day. I think that the transition has been good with Sheriff Cook now taking the helm. And I think that the morale is going to be very high here very soon. And look, this is a great county. These are great people to be able to serve when you're talking about the people of Clay County. So it's an honor for me as governor to appoint somebody who was elected anyways, but get a head start on this term. And so finishing out 2020 strong for the people of Clay County. Michelle, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank Governor DeSantis for coming to in the history books of our community and in our agency. I want to personally thank Interim Sheriff Matt Walsh for your leadership over the past few weeks. Your demeanor, your professionalism were exactly what this agency needed during this crisis. And so thank you for your leadership and your guidance over the past couple of weeks. And I look forward to continuing our work together as part of the transition team. To the citizens of Clay County and to the members of the Clay County Sheriff's Office, I look forward to serving each of you with honor and integrity. I am absolutely, truly humbled and honored to have this privilege as serving as the next sheriff of the Clay County Sheriff's Office. With that being said, I'm going to keep this really short. God bless Clay County and God bless America, and I'm available for any questions.
Sheriff or Governor, we've got to ask about the elephant in the room. What happened in the last few weeks? We had a year-long investigation. Your predecessor is arrested days before the election, and there's a write-in candidate put on the ballot who drops out the day after the election. should voters have any questions about this whole process, either from the state level with the order of the arrest of Daniels days before an election, or any of the other election issues locally?
Well, I will just say, Scott, I'm not privy to anything involving the FDLE investigation. That was another agency that handled it. As far as the timing, I never had any voice, and I don't think any of the candidates did. It just sort of played out as it did. As far as the citizens of Clay County, I think anybody who watched this campaign knew how hard that our team was working every single day, and we earned this.
Yeah, and there was nothing to do with the election. I mean, obviously, I had to take action once there were charges, but there was never any timing that I was aware of in terms of, as you said, it was a year-long thing. I mean, we knew something may happen. I reserved judgment because initially I didn't know how things would play out. But once it got to the point where there were live charges, that became an easy decision to do the suspension. And I would have been, I think, regardless of the election, I just think the facts were the facts, and I had to take action. And the previous sheriff was someone that I knew, and I think I always had good interactions with him. I didn't have anything personally negative to say about him.
Sheriff Robert Bradfield with First Coast News. The governor mentioned or alluded to you being, I guess, after November. I know that the sheriff in Alachua County lost her re-election, but being the only sheriff out of 67 counties as a female, maybe a message to the little girls watching this. I don't know if you had any role models, but your message out there of making history.
If you have a dream, follow it. If you are committed to something, do it. I think, what I'd like to say to the little girls out there is you can grow up to be a police officer. It's doable. It's definitely something that is an honorable profession. And if you want to serve your community, there is no better way to serve your community than boots on the ground serving as a law enforcement officer.
Megan Moriarty with Action News Jax. What's your message to the people of Clay County who might feel like they were failed by the previous sheriff? What's the status of the investigation, and are there any more charges?
Again, I can't speak to the FDLE investigation. I'll have to, refer you back to FDLE. To the citizens of Clay County, I just look forward to serving you with honor and integrity. I have spent 28 years in law enforcement and have worked every day to do things right and to do things better, and I'll just continue that service here.
And Sheriff, how do you come into the agency who's had to go through all this, watch the higher-ups deal with their issues? How do you come in and deal with the men and women of the Sheriff's Office and move forward into the next generation?
Scott, I think that's easy because the vast majority of people who go into law enforcement come in to do the right thing. And the men and women who were serving here, even with all the chaos going on around them, came into work every day and did their job and did the right thing. And so now it's just, again, we're just turning a page and let's continue moving forward.
Because of what happened with the previous sheriff, do you believe that there's this distrust between the people of Clay County and the sheriff's office?
I think in general, the citizens of Clay County trust the Clay County Sheriff's Office. And again, that's not because of me. It's not because of any sheriff. It's literally because of the work they do every single day. And for me, it's just about building upon that trust.
Sheriff, one issue as far as manpower, which is something you're going to have to deal with immediately. Your predecessor has said the Sheriff's Office was woefully understaffed as far as deputies. He was trying to get more in the budget. Are Clay County citizens protected? Is this something you're going to be dealing with soon?
Absolutely. The citizens of Clay County can sleep safely at night. I mean, they should know that there's men and women out there who are going to put their lives on the line to protect them. I think, law enforcement in general across the country, we're seeing a challenge in hiring people to come into this industry, into this profession, but it's up to us to work through that. We are literally today going through the budget to look at the number of deputies that we have on the street, and I assure you that if some realignment needs to happen within the organization to make sure we have enough out there, that'll happen.
How does that work? Do you go to the county commission, or how will that process work once you've looked at the budget?
So there's two different things that'll happen. First, we'll do an internal review of alignment. Do we have the sworn personnel in the right places? And that's something that I can change myself. I can adjust as needed internally. As far as asking for additional budget moving forward to pay for additional deputies, that'll be a conversation that we have with the commission. But I have a great working relationship with the commission, and I don't see that changing. So I'm sure we'll be able to work together to get that done.
And I'm sorry to belabor this point. Will you engage the community on asking for any more officers? There obviously is a large contingent of the police resources reallocated, will you engage the community in that conversation?
Sure. I think of, part of the responsible, a responsible answer is not only talking to the men and women who work here about what do we do good, where do we need help at, but also going out and talking to the community. And making sure that they understand, that I understand what it is they expect and what they need, and then finding that place in the middle where we can meet. Part of being a responsible sheriff is listening to every single community member, and I absolutely plan on doing that.
Great.
Governor DeSantis, I have a question about, the big bombshell dropped today on Quest Diagnostics. People who got tests from that lab in the last couple of days, should they even expect results at this point?
Well, so I think it's just the one good thing about this was a massive data dump going back to April. The individuals who tested positive at that time were notified by the lab, which is obviously very important. The lab just did not submit those results to the state, so you had several months of results that were dumped. Apparently they found them somehow. That's not acceptable. They're required to do this in a timely way. They have been, in terms of the labs we've dealt with, more on the tardy side than some others. We have specific contracts with some labs to do our long-term care facilities, and they will, once they get the sample, they'll give us a result within 36 hours. And so we've had much better, I think, results in some other areas. And one, these labs know that their results are being used by people to determine the course of certain policies. Someone will say the positive rate has gone up. Maybe we can't, go in-person schooling, although most people are doing that. And I think it's working well under the circumstances. But it's just, so that actually has an effect. And so I think it's really disquieting to see that happen. Now, at the same time, and I've been saying this now for weeks, these test results are not the best indicator when we're looking at COVID-19 data. The best indicators are things like ED visits for COVID-like illness, number of COVID-positive patients in the hospital, number of COVID-positive patients in the ICU. When you talk about test results, that can be data dumps. Even if it's a weak data dump, that's still a big deal if you're trying to assess a trend, because by the time the lab runs it, you were probably infected 7 days or more before that. And then now we find out about the limitations of these tests. You can test positive for up to 12 weeks. Obviously, you only shed infectious virus for a very short, you're talking about days. There was an article in the New York Times even saying that Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada, there was a study done of all the positive tests they have had over a certain period of time, and it was determined that 90% of them did not have enough virus to be infectious. So just the test result, understand what that does though. That causes someone to have to isolate for 2 weeks. So you're taking someone out of their job. You're taking someone potentially out of school. Those are huge, huge consequences. And so I think this whole testing regime and everything and the reporting has been problematic, to say the least. I'm not saying you don't consider it at all, but I think you have to consider it knowing the limitations. And this may be the most egregious example we've seen, but it isn't the only example. We had one a couple weeks ago down in South Florida. It was a lab that just kind of got into the COVID game a few months ago, and they didn't report any results to the state for the first, I think, 8 weeks of them being in operation. So they do this big dump, and it was Miami-Dade's most tests, and it was over, I think, an 8-week period. So that's very, very problematic. But if you look at the indicators, fewer and fewer people are going to the emergency department for COVID-like illness all throughout the state of Florida, and really all throughout the Sun Belt. As everyone rose, everyone's kind of fallen, and our country ED visits is back to where it was, I think, at the beginning of March even. So those are good trends, and that will really tell you more about the prevalence in the community than some of the tests where you don't know when they were taken, you don't know what kind of error rate they have. I mean, you think about it, Florida at our peak, we were doing 100,000 plus test results a day. So if there's a false, what's the false positive rate? If it's even 1%, that's 1,000 cases that are being identified for people that actually weren't ever infected at all. Some of these other areas, there have been suggestions that maybe more than that. So it's it's a limited tool. Certainly, if you have symptoms, I think that's something that's good, because if you get tested, we can assume you have live virus at that point. But I think particularly with the asymptomatic folks, knowing how long the dead virus will linger, knowing that the test cannot tell you whether you're infectious or not, there's just a certain level of limitations on it. And so I think as we've seen some of these issues, I think you have seen folks really look at the ED visits, really look at the hospital capacity. I mean, right now we probably have, I think, 5 or 6% of our total licensed beds have COVID positive patients. The rest are either empty or have patients with other things. And so those are obviously good trends that we're seeing. Final thing before I leave, I just want to say about inspiring young women. And I don't know where this is going, but I do know that my daughter, 3-year-old daughter Madison, does have a pair of handcuffs. And she did have Mason, my 2-year-old son, kind of locked and loaded and walking him to our imaginary jail cell. So we'll see where that goes. Thanks.